You should use a little less chakra, Sasuke-san. Sasuke nodded, and with his next attempt, he got a little higher up in the tree. When Kakashi figured out Zabuza was still alive, he decided to give them all some extra training. Though why he didn't do so at any point before now in the month since they've been Genin, Sasuke had no idea. Anyway, since Hinata already knew how to do it, Kakashi had instructed her to teach it to both Sasuke and Shikamaru. Under normal circumstances, Sasuke's pride would take a big hit at having to be taught something by one of his classmates. He was supposed to be the best after all, and his pride was a little hurt, but he couldn't muster up any true negative feelings for Hinata for unintentionally showing him up. She was just so sincerely humble it was impossible to get annoyed at her over this. Though humble might be understating it. Sasuke was self-aware enough to know that his social skills weren't that great, but even he understood how low Hinata's opinion of herself was after that encounter with Zabuza. It confused him a great deal, since she clearly had some skills, but then he remembered that she came from the Hyuga clan. Hinata might not be useless, but Sasuke knew that if he was only as skilled as Hinata, he would consider himself a failure too. Some clans, like his own, simply held themselves to a different standard. What would normally be considered exceptional skill for, let's say, an Akemichi, would be considered just normal for an Uchiha, and what would be considered acceptable for a Nara would be considered a huge failure for an Uchiha. If the Hyuga held themselves to a similar standard, then Hinata's feelings made a lot more sense to him. When he had shared his hypothesis with Shikamaru, however, the Nara had gotten angry. You can shove your elitism where the sun doesn't shine. And don't even try to argue that Hinata's feelings are somehow logical, they're complete bullshit. Sasuke hadn't meant to insult anyone, nor had he meant to argue that the way his female teammates felt was okay. He had just been trying to understand it all. As mentioned, Sasuke knew his social skills weren't that great, but he also didn't care enough to correct the misunderstanding. To him, the solution was clear, and it was the same as it always was. Get stronger. Ignore everything else. It should be the same for Hinata. The only way to stop feeling worthless was to become so strong no amount of self-delusion or unrealistically high standards could break your spirit. Hinata, you've been a big help, but you shouldn't neglect your own training just to babysit me and Shikamaru. Are you sure? It really is no trouble. I am sure, and we all need to prepare to face Zabuza again, so that includes you. Go to Kakashi, see if he has something for you. Of course. Thank you, Sasuke-san. And drop the honorifics. We're teammates, aren't we? Of course. I'm sorry, Sasuke. I mean sorry, Sasuke. And stop apologizing. Sorry, I mean I'm not sorry. I mean I'll just go now. Sasuke sighed. Hinata might not be crazy about him like most other girls he knew, but she was clearly still crazy in other ways. He still preferred her over Shikamaru though. But at least the lazy ass seemed to be taking their current situation and training seriously. Hinata was practicing by herself, doing the standard katas of the Hyuga style and hitting nearby trees with her strikes, trying to increase the speed at which she was moving. Become strong, he says. Hinata bitterly thinks back to what Sasuke and later Kakashi just said to her. I've been trying to become strong my whole life. What difference will these few days make? At home, she was forced to practice every single day, and what had it gotten her? Hinata screamed in frustration and hit the tree so fast she forgot to add enough chakra to her strikes, meaning her nail hit the tree trunk without that bit of extra protection. Hinata yelled and hissed in pain. She looked at her middle finger and found that its nail was blue. She briefly put her finger in her mouth in a vain attempt to stop the pain before she discovered she needed her mouth to continue hissing. Oh my gosh, are you alright? Hinata looked and found a raven-haired teenage girl looking at her with clear concern. Or, well, what she assumed was a girl anyway. I'm fine, she said, trying to ignore the pain and the tears gathering in her eyes. She tried to center herself and resume her practice. She didn't like it when people saw her fail at practice, but it was something she was used to. What the? You can't do that with a broken nail? The stranger ran towards her and actually grabbed her arm to prevent her from hurting herself. And if Hinata had actually spent more time around people who weren't ninja, she'd have realized that this wasn't something that should be that easy for a normal person. "Please let go of me," she said, and he, since we all know who this is, I am calling this a he let go of her immediately. "I appreciate the concern, but you needn't trouble yourself over me. It doesn't hurt that much," she lied. "And I need to get back to practice." "What you need to do is get that looked after." "It will heal on its own." Hinata was sure of that. Broken nails were hardly uncommon when your style of fighting involved hitting your opponent with the tips of your fingers. "All the same, you shouldn't be putting pressure on it so soon after an injury. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself, I insist." Hinata wasn't nearly assertive enough to argue, so she desisted. "Fine, then I guess I should return home." By which she meant Tazuna's house. "I could put a little ointment on it if you like, or maybe a little ribbon to tie around the wound." Hinata opened her mouth to say it wasn't necessary, but she was cut off. "I insist," the stranger said, this time accompanied by a wry smile. Hinata nodded cautiously and allowed the stranger to treat her. "If it's not too personal, might I ask what you were trying to do?" "Training?" "Really?" the stranger said, his eyes landing on the Konoha headband hanging around her neck. "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I hadn't noticed." "It's fine, really." "Still, you seem strong for your age, especially for a girl." Hinata looked down at the ground. "Not strong enough." "Why not? Why do you need to be so strong?" That question didn't have a simple answer. "I just have to." "For whom? For yourself? Or for somebody else?" Again, not a simple question. Her clan, her father, the Hyuga elders, they had always told her she wasn't strong enough. She was a failure, and she wanted that to not be the case. But she didn't really want to become strong for the sake of her clan. The clan would be fine. They had her younger sister Hanabi. Still, she didn't like being considered a waste of space. "I guess I'm doing it for myself." The stranger smiled. "Then maybe that's why you are experiencing such difficulty. I find that when your efforts are not in your own behalf, but on the behalf of someone precious, someone who is important to you, that's when we show the best of ourselves. Tell me, do you have someone like that? Someone who is important to you?" "A few. Naruto, whom she admired, came to mind. Her team was okayish. And her family, well, Hanabi wasn't terrible." "Then maybe you could grow strong for their sake." Hinata smiled sadly. "I don't think they need me." "Ah." The stranger offered her a look so full of compassion, it briefly took her breath away. "Then you have my most sincere sympathy." He stood up and started walking away. "I've kept you long enough." "Wait!" Hinata cried, and he stopped. "What's your name?" And gender, she wanted to add, but that would be rude beyond measure. "My name is Haku. What's yours?" "Hinata." "Well, it was nice to meet you, Hinata. I am sure we will meet again." Why did he sound so sad when saying that? Hinata wondered. Upon walking back to the house, she reflected upon the conversation. She had said nobody needed her, but she had said that without really thinking about it. Her mind simply naturally gravitated towards such dark places. She knew, though, that if she said that out loud where any of Team 7 could hear her, they'd disagree strongly. And surely they knew best, right? It was a comforting thought. And in case you're wondering, yes, if Hinata had looked at Haku with her Byakugan active, she would have recognized him as the fake hunter ninja from before. But she didn't, so she still has no clue. So now onto the day of the confrontation. All of Team 7 arrives at the bridge to find all the workers wounded, courtesy of Zabuza. Not sure if those workers are supposed to survive this, since in canon they just kind of disappear after one of them warns the group of some kind of monster. I'm going to say they are just knocked out. Next, let's take a step back and look at another detail of this event, specifically the situation with Inari and his mother Tsunami, and the two goons that come to them to take them hostage. The only reason Naruto was nearby to intervene in canon was that A, he overslept, and B, Kakashi wanted him to give him the chance to rest after training himself to exhaustion. None of that happens here. Hinata doesn't oversleep and none of them allow Shikamaru to oversleep. I will however fudge things to say that Kakashi would at least leave some kind of protection behind for the valuable hostages in the form of 2 large dog summons. I know that didn't happen in canon, but come on people, Kakashi is supposed to be smart. Summoning a few guard dogs is the least he could do. Now as to the fight. Well, Sasuke starts his fight with Haku as per canon, and it continues that way up until Haku pulls out the crystal ice mirrors and it's clear Sasuke can't solo this opponent. I'm sure Shikamaru and Hinata would try to offer some range support, but Haku can dodge or intercept anything they could throw at him, as he proved by doing such to Sakura's range support in canon. Naruto only hit him with a projectile because he wasn't yet a known factor on the battlefield. In canon, Sasuke clearly believed it was advantageous that he was inside the mirrors while Naruto was outside. We never learn what his plan was, since Naruto then just appears inside the dome in a haha Naruto is so stupid moment, and that's the end of it. That said, I am not sure what benefit there would be in someone being outside the dome, besides not risking yourself. I don't think those mirrors are more breakable from the outside. And if you're up against a technique that restricts your opponent to move within a sphere, it's actually logical to be inside that sphere. If you're outside a circle, then the average distance you need to go, even assuming a direct line of travel, which you can't always do in this case, to any random point in the circle, is longer than if you were at the center of the circle, in which case the distance is never longer than the radius. The point that I'm trying to make is that I have no clue what canon Sasuke was thinking when he thought Naruto should stay out of the Dome of Mirrors. So that said, I believe Hinata would willingly join Sasuke in the dome, because neither I nor she can really think of another way she could help. What are you doing in here, Hinata? I thought you promised not to do something suicidal again. No more so than you, Hinata responded. Your resistance will make no difference. You've only doomed yourself as well. I do not wish to hurt you, but I will if you get in Zabuza's way. As much as Sasuke didn't like it that Hinata had put herself in danger, he had to admit that intercepting the Senbon was a lot easier with someone guarding his back. While that is happening, Kakashi is starting his fight with Zabuza in zero visibility mist, and that just kind of drags on for a while. Oh, and I should say that I am skeptical about Kakashi's dogs being able to catch Zabuza off guard. Yes, it worked in canon, but I am not at all shy about changing things up if I believe it's plausible and serves the narrative. Zabuza can fight blind using only sound. He should be able to hear the dogs as they tunnel towards him from underground, long before they catch him. I freely admit, this is as much a what if as it is a fan fiction in video format. And where is Shikamaru in all this? Well, he is guarding Tazuna, thinking hard about some way they could all make it out of this alive. If he is reading the flow of battle correctly, then Hinata and Sasuke wouldn't be able to keep Zabuza's accomplice occupied for long, and he doubted Kakashi could handle both enemies at the same time. When playing shogi against an inferior opponent, his father had occasionally insisted that he start the match with less pieces on his side of the board, to make the fight more even. This very much felt like that, except they weren't fighting an inferior opponent. Their side simply had less resources. Shikamaru himself was almost a non-issue in this battle. With Zabuza's zero visibility mist, there were no shadows, which made Shikamaru's jutsu all but worthless. He did come up with a plan, though it was less of a plan and more of a desperate gamble. It was far-fetched, risky, and would leave Tazuna exposed for a long time. But it was the best plan he could think of, and he'd have to start it soon if it had any hope of making a difference. He told Tazuna as much. It's my fault you're in this mess, so you do what you have to. Shikamaru nodded and made a hand sign. Back in the Dome of Mirrors... Damn it, all we can do is defend, Sasuke said. He was bleeding from half a dozen small wounds, though he had stopped getting more of those after awakening his Sharingan and Hinata started guarding his back. Maintaining these mirrors seemed to use a lot of chakra, Hinata said through labored breath. If we can just hold on for long enough, he must run out eventually. Hinata's Byakugan could spot the needles coming at her from all directions, but her reflexes weren't as good as Sasuke's even before he had awakened his Sharingan, so she was actually the worst off between the two. Haku too was getting frustrated with this battle. After awakening his Sharingan, Sasuke had started to predict his movements enough so that he could threaten him with throwing weapons, and if he took a direct hit from one of those fireballs it would be over for him. So he kept his distance and continued his efforts to slowly bleed them with Senbon. Yes, these mirrors used a not insignificant amount of chakra, but not so much that he couldn't finish off his opponents and still have enough stamina to back up Zabuza afterwards. An additional difficulty for Hinata and Sasuke was that they couldn't just dodge the needles. Since they were back to back, they had to parry all attacks, lest their teammate behind them gets hit. Again, this was easier for a Sharingan user with its predictive and analytical abilities than for a Byakugan user who didn't have those advantages. That said, Hinata was doing better than she had expected. She remembered Haku's words from the forest, and there was something there. The big flaw with fighting for herself was that she really didn't consider herself worth fighting for. She didn't know if Sasuke counted as a friend for her, but he was worth more than her. So she tried to fight for his sake, and for a time, that seemed to work. Pure determination could only carry her so far, however. The enemy could sense that she was the weaker link of the two, so when he went for the kill, it was through her. The needles were too numerous, and she wasn't fast enough to parry them all. She could dodge, but then the person behind her would. Sasuke noticed that the assault on him lessened briefly. Behind him, he heard Hinata parrying a few needles, and then nothing. A part of him was worried about taking his eyes off the mirrors for even an instant, yet he couldn't help himself. When he turned around, his red Sharingan eyes widened in horror. Hinata looked like a pincushion. She had been pierced by the Senbon in several places, including her neck. Blood was already trickling down the newly made wounds. Hinata herself looked more surprised than in pain. She thought of her promise to Kakashi. It seems I broke my... And she fell to the ground. She still lives, but only just, the enemy ninja says. Haku had two reasons for leaving Hinata alive. The first was that he simply didn't want to kill her. The second was that a helpless but alive teammate required protection, while a corpse only needed to be avenged. True, the boy could leave Hinata to her fate, but Zabuza had often lectured her on the sentimentality of Leaf Ninja, and how that was something that could and should be exploited at every opportunity. Don't worry about me. Hinata's voice was so faint it was difficult to hear. Don't try to talk, Sasuke said, feeling panic well up inside him. You can't afford to protect me. That was true, Sasuke knew. He could barely keep up while it was the two of them working together. The wise decision would be to ignore Hinata and focus on defeating his opponent, and hope the enemy wouldn't punish him for it by striking at his defenseless teammate. He didn't know what to do. What would Itachi do? Well, since Hinata was no longer useful, Itachi would probably discard her to focus on the mission. Sasuke nodded to himself. Now that he knew what Itachi would do, he just needed to do the exact opposite and he'd be golden. Remember what Kakashi said? Those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. Now shut up and let me deal with this. He moved the sand over Hinata's body, prepared to defend her to the last, even if it was the last thing he did. Friend, Hinata thought through her slowly darkening vision, a peaceful smile appearing on her bloodied face. Right here at the end, knowing they were all about to die, the thought that she had a friend with her was comforting. And at this point, Haku just slowly starts to overwhelm Sasuke. You could make the argument that this situation would make Sasuke's eyes evolve beyond the 1 and 2 Tomoe version he got in the show. But no, Sasuke's Sharingan, even this early version, is capable of following Haku's moves and predicting the paths of the needles, at least the ones in his field of vision. His eyes aren't a problem, and even if he had a fully evolved Sharingan, it wouldn't have mattered. The Sharingan doesn't offer any extra speed, and that's Sasuke's problem. Actually, now that he is fighting alone, Hinata's eyes would, paradoxically, been better at fending off Haku's needles. The Sharingan, unlike the Byakugan, doesn't offer near 360 degrees field of vision, so all Haku has to do is keep attacking Sasuke from all directions, and there isn't much Sasuke can do about that, even if his Sharingan did evolve fully. And if you think Haku's mirror-enhanced speed isn't enough to pull that off, then Haku can always just add water clones to his technique to increase the pressure even more. He didn't do so in the show, but you can't convince me that Haku can do water clones when he was personally trained by Zabuza. As Sasuke is getting riddled by needles, his anger at himself would keep rising. Why am I still so weak? And he'd soon join Hinata on the floor in unconsciousness. Kakashi is more than a little alarmed to see the masked ninja coming to back up Zabuza. Zabuza laughs. Did you finish them off? They have been taken care of, Haku says. He hated misleading Zabuza by letting him think they were dead, but he would probably take advantage of the helpless leaf ninja to trap Kakashi, just like Haku had done. The difference being that Zabuza really would be trying to kill the helpless leaf genin. Haku was really hoping they could end this day without having to kill any of the children, at least. For Jonin though, he was an adult professional shinobi and Haku wouldn't let himself feel guilty about his death, and Zabuza would want the prestige of having killed Kakashi of the Sharingan Eye. And now we get Kakashi versus the tag team of Zabuza and Haku, and I'm going to give the advantage to Zabuza's team. A couple of factors. First, Haku and Zabuza are more than likely very used to working as a team. Second, Kakashi is probably in a lot of emotional turmoil right now, and since Kakashi isn't an Uchiha or a Jinchuriki, he doesn't get a chance for a power boost for being pissed off. Third, Zabuza did make the claim that Kakashi wouldn't be able to beat even Haku alone. And while I definitely find that claim questionable, I do think that Zabuza legitimately thought very highly of Haku's skills, so he's definitely not a non-factor in this fight. Lastly, both Zabuza and likely Haku are both trained to fight in zero visibility conditions. Kakashi isn't helpless under those conditions, but he is less used to it, and it does take away one of his biggest weapons, the Sharingan. The Chidori would require him to first get a clear shot at one of his opponents and maybe even pin them down first. So yeah, I think Kakashi is likely to lose this fight. It would be high difficulty for Zabuza and Haku, but I think they could do it. At the last moment, however, a voice would shout, "Zabuza, I order you to stand down!" This was a voice both Haku and Zabuza would recognize. Zabuza would let the mist clear up a little just enough so they could all see Gato. A Gato with an explosive tag plastered on his forehead, and Shikamaru standing next to him. Shikamaru looked a little beat up, since he did need to fight a couple of goons to pull this off, but otherwise he seems fine. Next to Tazuna, a simple clone of Shikamaru would puff out of existence. Tazuna had in actuality been helpless this entire time that Shikamaru had been away. It had been a very risky move, Shikamaru knew, since there was no way to know how long it would take to track Gato down. But it wasn't like there was any way he could contribute to the fight directly. And with Zabuza and Haku both here, Gato's strongest combatants were away. It was also Shikamaru's good fortune that Gato had already been moving towards the battlefield, accompanied by a lot of goons. Getting Gato away from those goons took some doing, but, well, this is Shikamaru. I'm sure he'd have thought of something. "You're in luck, Kakashi. It seems there is a chance you'll make it out of here after all," Zabuza said. Kakashi didn't answer and just glares back. He was still thinking about Hinata and Sasuke, whom he assumes are dead. Kakashi at this point would also be in a bad shape and bleeding from several wounds. "I won't stop unless I get my money, of course." "You'll get your money," Gato growled. He hated losing, but he hated dying even more. "I want double," Zabuza said. "What? No way! You didn't even get me wave!" "If Gato dies, you won't get paid at all," Shikamaru would point out. "True, kid, but think about what I have here. The bounty on Kakashi alone would equal my original fee with Gato. Next to that, I might also get a pair of Byakugan eyes and 1.5 pair of Sharingan. Ha 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 ha! On second thought, Gato, make that 10 times my original bargain, and that's me being generous. What? Are you insane? Gato would yell. Only you get to decide how much your life is worth, Shikamaru would say. From his brief interaction with Gato, he suspected that the man would do anything to preserve his own life. Gato would eventually cave, but he would successfully bargain for safe escort outside of Wave with Zabuza. This would rob him of most of his immediate funds, which meant he'd be unable to pay any of the other goons he had hired, so he needed that bit of extra protection. Haku would be sent to collect the money. Haku, by the way, is really happy with this outcome, and was silently thanking the Shikamaru in his head for his cleverness. Zabuza's reward would be greater than they expected, the people of Wave would be saved, and they didn't need to kill any of the Leaf Ninja. The only big loser here was Gato, and fuck that guy. When Haku returned with the prize, he'd be greeted with Zabuza glaring at him. He motioned towards Sasuke and Hinata, who had by now regained consciousness. You're still too soft, Haku. Kakashi had used his brief respite to recover some of his strength and treat some of his wounds. Zabuza and Haku would still have the advantage if the fight were to resume, but even with just them against Kakashi, the fight hadn't been so one-sided that they could be careless. So it would be even more so if the newly awakened Leaf Gang got involved again. I am sorry, Master. I didn't expect the situation to drag on so long. Whatever. Come on, Gato, my friend. What do you say we find some transportation out of this shithole? Get that explosive tag off of me first. It can stay like that for now, Shikamaru said. He didn't for one moment believe that Gato wouldn't immediately order Zabuza to resume the fight as soon as he was out of immediate danger. You'd best wait for an expert to remove it. Tampering with it might set it off. He was lying. The paper bomb could be ripped off and thrown away without issue so long as Shikamaru wasn't close enough to trigger it. Zabuza shot him an amused look that indicated he at least suspected the lie. But he didn't say anything, and so they made to leave. Wait, Kakashi said. What is it, Kakashi? Zabuza said. Not you, Kakashi growled, and motioned towards Haku. Haku, was it? I want to thank you for sparing my students. Of those two students, Sasuke was glaring resentfully at Haku and Zabuza. And Hinata? Well, she was just relieved they'd all make it back safely. You won't beat me so easy next time, Sasuke would say. Then I hope we never meet again, Sasuke-san. Haku would answer before responding to Kakashi. You are most welcome, Leaf Ninja. But you should train them a bit more before throwing them into real combat like this. Hear, hear, Shikamaru would voice his agreement. Kakashi sighed and nodded. He knew it screwed up, and it was only through luck that they'd all make it back out alive. So Haku, Zabuza, and Gato would all leave Wave. Gato's other goons would need to be cleaned up since they're likely to try and extract their payment from the poor townsfolk. But Kakashi can solo those if he has to. Not that he has to, since Sasuke wouldn't allow himself to sit out that fight, and he has some pent-up aggression he wants to take out on some deserving assholes. So the bridge would be completed, and it would be named the Great Shikamaru Bridge. When Shikamaru would later learn of this, he would lament and curse whatever god he might have offended in some past life, and his father, again, would laugh his ass off. And that's where we're going to leave things for now. Please join me next time for part 14. Nikes out.